Hello everyone. We were discussing about population interactions. In lecture number 17 we discussed about the first population interaction, that is predation. In lecture number 18 we discussed about the second population interaction, that is parasitism. Now in today's lecture, we'll discuss about the third interaction, which is competition. So taking these examples, we're going to understand what competition is. So we're talking about the third interaction, population interaction. What is that? It is competition. Now, we have seen the symbols, like we are given symbols. For predation, we will tell the predator is getting benefited, whereas the prey is getting harmed. In parasitism also, we told like the parasite is getting benefited, whereas the host is getting harmed. Like that, in competition, if you see, so then I'll tell for competition, both the species are getting harmed. Means the symbol what we have to represent for competition is minus for one species and minus for the other species also. Now, if you remember your childhood stories, right, pre-nursery, nursery stories, we used to hear about a story like a dog and a bread. So, two dogs saw the loaf of bread. So, one dog is fighting with the other dog, telling that like, I saw this bread piece first. The other dog says like, no, I saw this bread piece first. They started fighting with each other. Now, in between a monkey came. I am telling about the story. In between a monkey came and I told, so you people don't fight, I can make it into half and half and equally distribute for both of you. So these two dogs, they trusted the monkey and they were listening to the monkey. So monkey made it into pieces, two pieces. But purposefully, it has made one big piece and one small piece. After making two pieces, so it was checking, then it told like this piece is bigger than this piece. Let me make this one equal to this piece. So by eating a bit. So that monkey ate this one. So it ate this one. When she eats this one becomes bigger then she tells, Ayo, again, this became bigger. Let me take one more bite of this. So doing like that, it completely consumed the bread. And the two dogs, thinking that they will get a piece of bread, they were waiting. So this is a good example for competition, telling that when there is competition between two different species, both are getting harmed. So the story what I narrated also tells the same thing. In competition, both the species will get harmed. That is competition, right? So even when Darwin was talking about fitness, even he told that there are two types of interactions. What are they? Intraspecific competition and interspecific competition. So we don't fight with the other human that much the way we fight with other species, right? Might be an animal or some other thing. So even Darwin was convinced that interspecific competition is a vital force. He was convinced that interspecific competition means competition between two different things will help the man to evolve better. So we competed with all other animals and so we got evolved more. So man is at the highest level, right, in terms of evolution. So Darwin was convinced that competition is the force which made the man to evolve far, far better than the other individuals. Okay. So when we talk about competition, so we will tell when does competition occurs. We can take the first example. Competition occurs when the resources are limited. So we will take this as an example to understand the first point. What's the first point I told? Competition occurs when resources are limited. When resources are limited. So we can take this as an example. To understand the point, what do you mean by competition occurs when resources are limited? If you see in shallow South American lakes, so I took a pond here, so we can tell in shallow South American lakes. In shallow South American lakes, there was competition between the visiting flamingos and the resident fishes. So there was competition between the visiting flamingos and the resident fishes for their common food, which is the zooplankton. So these small insects which I have drawn here are the zooplanktons. For fish also zooplankton is a food. For flamingo also zooplankton is a food. So now means since both their food is the same, then it will be limited only. So then there's competition. Whoever is stronger will take the food faster. So in shallow South American lakes, there is competition. There is competition between the visiting flamingos and there's a competition between visiting flamingos and the resident fishes. for what? And the resident fishes for common food are? It is for common food. What is their common food? It is zooplanktons. So, when will competition occur? We took a first condition. Competition will occur when resources are limited. So, we took the example to explain what do you mean by limited resources means. We took shallow South American lakes. There we have seen that, we noticed that. So, there's a competition between flamingos and the birds for the zooplanktons. Now, this is the second example we are seeing here. Now, what is this point then? Resources need not be limited always. Resources need not be limited always. So, there can be interference competition also. So, here we told resources are limited. Now, this picture will explain that resources need not be limited. Means if resources need not be limited means abundant resources are there. Then what is the concept? We are telling it is interference competition. It is interference competition. What do you mean by interference competition? Again, we have to discuss about the picture which we are drawn here. So, abundant tortoise in Galapagos Islands, they are there. Abundant tortoise are there in Galapagos Island. Now, for an experimental purpose, when they have introduced goats into the Galapagos Islands, so because of the overgrazing efficiency of the goats, so it will move fast, it will graze fast when compared to this slow moving creature and slow eating creature. Within a decade, the abundant tortoise became less, they became extinct in the Galapagos Islands. So means it is nothing but, see, the grass is abundant here. Means we are telling that resources are not limited, they are abundant. Means let me draw some grass here for our understanding, telling that all this is grass, okay? Telling that the resources are not limited. Resources are so much here. Even though the resources are so much here, so it is an interference, overgrazing ability of one species. So made the other species to become extinct. So what is that example we are talking about? We are telling in Galapagos Islands. I am writing here. In Galapagos Islands, abundant tortoise. What is this? This is abundant tortoise. Abundant tortoise became extinct. It became extinct in a decade. It became extinct in a decade. So, by introducing goats into the island. After introducing goats into the island. So, in Galapagos Islands, the abundant tortoise became extinct in a decade after introducing the goats into that island. It is because of the overgrazing efficiency of one species. So, it is because of overgrazing efficiency of goat, right? It is the overgrazing efficiency of one species is eliminating the other species, right? So, it led to the extinction of abundant tortoise. So, this is another condition. First condition, we are telling competition will occur between two species when the resources are limited, right? So, the second one we are telling resources need not be limited always. There could be interference competition also. For understanding interference competition, we have took this as an example. Abundant grass is there. So, means resources are not limited here, but because of the interference of the goat, the tortoise became extinct. Now, third example, what's the third condition for competition to occur? So, we can see competitive release here. What do you mean by competitive release? Let's try to understand by taking this Varanus as an example. Okay. So, the third point I am writing here, what is that? Competitive release. It is about competitive release. So, what can we understand by this competitive release means? A species whose distribution is restricted because of the superior species. For example, if you see, this is a smaller barnacle. Smaller barnacle is called Cathalmus. So I'll write it here. This is a smaller barnacle. What is it called? Catalamus. And this is a bigger barnacle. It's called Belanus. This is a bigger barnacle called as Belanus. Right? So there's a bigger barnacle, there's a smaller barnacle. Bigger barnacle is superior, competitively superior one when compared to the smaller barnacle, which is called as Catalamus. We can tell a species whose distribution is restricted to a small area. Catalamus is restricted to a small area because of the superior one called Belanus. So in an experiment, when we remove this Belanus from an intercostal area, then because the superior one is not there, Catalamus will overspread. Catalamus will overspread. Let me write down here. So what should we write about competitive release? A species whose distribution is restricted. A species whose distribution, Catalamus distribution is restricted to a small geographical area. So Catalamus species is restricted to a small geographical area due to the competitive superior species. Due to the competitive Belanus, right? Due to the competitive superior species Belanus. Now, when we remove, for experiment's sake, when we remove this competitive one, then what happens? The smaller Catalamus will widespread. So when we remove the Catalamus, when we remove the Belanus, we can tell that the smaller one will nicely expand. That's it. The third point, what's the first condition? We told competition occurs when the resources are limited. We took flamingos and the resident fishes for the common food. Zooplanktons. Second one, we are telling resources need not be always limited. There could be interference competition also. We have taken Galapagos Island as an example. We were talking about introducing goats have eliminated the abundant tortoise in that particular island in almost a decade. And third example, we were talking about competitive release. In competitive release, we are telling that there's a smaller Belanus. There's a smaller Belanus which is called as Catalamus. And there's a bigger barnacle. These two are called barnacles, right? Let me write down here. Both are called barnacles. Smaller barnacle is called Catalamus. Bigger barnacle is called Belanus. Smaller barnacle will confine itself to a small geographical area because of the presence of the superior one called Belanus. For experimental sake, if you remove the Belanus, then Catalamus can widespread. This is a third condition. Now, when we look about fourth condition, we have to talk about Gauss competitive exclusion principle. So I'll write down here about the fourth point, this picture. What is that called? Gauss's competitive exclusion principle, which can also be called as law. Gauss's competitive exclusion principle, which can also be called as law. So what did this scientist Gauss explain? He tells that when two closely related species, they compete for the same resources. So these two, one is a grey color squirrel, the other one is a red color squirrel. So both of them are competing for the same food, that is hazelnut. So both of them are competing for the same food, that is hazelnut. So when two closely related species in a geographical area if they are living and they're competing for the same food, they cannot coexist, he'll tell. The competitive inferior one will get eliminated because of the superior one. Now let us write down what does Gauss competitive exclusion states. He tells that two similar species. So two similar species means one is the grey squirrel, the other one is the red squirrel. So we are talking about two similar species, two closely related similar species competing for the same resources. Two similar species competing for the same resources. Both of them are competing for the hazelnut. Competing for the same resources cannot coexist, he will tell. They cannot coexist. They cannot coexist, and the inferior one will be eliminated by the superior one. And the inferior one Here the inferior one is the grey one. The inferior one is eliminated by the superior one. This is what is Gauss competitive exclusive principle says. But then modern scientists, recent scientists don't support this gross generalization. Why they don't support? Let us see. So let us just write down, like modern scientists do not support, they don't accept this gross generalization what Gauss has told. What did he tell? He tells like two similar species competing for the same resources cannot coexist together in that geographical area. The inferior one will be eliminated by the superior one. But scientists are not accepting to this. Now what is the reason? What is the explanation or what is the experiment they have done? It was done by a scientist called MacArthur. MacArthur, what he has done? So he is telling like, he showed that species facing competition might co-evolve, right? So species facing competition might evolve a mechanism. Species facing competition might evolve a mechanism. So MacArthur says that the species which are facing competition, they might evolve a mechanism to coexist rather than exclusion, right? So they might evolve a mechanism to coexist rather than exclusion. Means they know that if they don't coexist, one will exclude the other one. So instead of exclusion, so they can come to an understanding and both of them can coexist together. That's what Arthur told, and he explained also. He saw that there are 5 warbler finches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He observed in Scotland there are 5 warbler finches. There are 5 birds living on the same tree. So here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 birds living on the same tree. Now they avoided competition among themselves by making a behavioral pattern of different foraging times, right? So one will come for picking the insects from in the early morning. The other one will come so in the morning time. The third one will come mid-afternoon. The fourth one will come at the dusk. And the last one will come at the night. So means what they have done? So they have they made an adjustment, coexistence. How are they doing? By changing their foraging activities, by showing differences in their foraging activities. This will come in the early morning sunrise time and it will pick the insects from this level and above. Whereas this one will come morning time and it will pick the insects at this level. The third one will come afternoon and it pick the insects from this level. They have made resource partitioning. This concept is called as, what is this called? MacArthur's resource partitioning. Let me write down here. This is called resource partitioning. This is our 5th explanation for competition. So means the resources, they have partitioned themselves. They are showing behavioral changes in their foraging patterns. They are showing behavioral changes in their foraging patterns. And all 5 are coexisting on the same tree. All 5 are coexisting on the same tree. That's what our MacArthur has told. This is about resource partitioning. So this is our today's class about competition. Competition is a type of population interaction where we are telling there is harmfulness for both. Species 1 is also getting harmed, species 2 is also getting harmed. When will competition occurs? With some examples, with pictorial examples we understood. So it will occur when the resources are limited. Flamingos and the resident fishes are the example. So resources need not be limited always. For that we have taken interference competition example. We have taken in Galapagos Island, there we have taken Abingdon tortoise, and by introducing goats these got eliminated. And the third one we are talking about competitive release. In competitive release, so when we remove the competitive superior one, inferior one will release out. It can spread to several areas. For that we have taken barnacle as an example. The superior barnacle called Balanus, when you remove, inferior one will spread nicely. And the fourth point, we are talking about Gauss competitive exclusive principle. In Britain, we can take an example. In Britain, the inferior grey squirrel got eliminated by the superior red squirrel because both of them are they want the same food, that is hazelnuts, right? So this states Gauss competitive exclusive principle. It states that two similar species competing for the same food cannot coexist together. That's what he told by taking this as an example. But modern day scientists don't accept it. What they are telling, Arthur showed that instead of becoming extinction, they can co-evolve, they can come to a conclusion, they can co-evolve. He has taken warbler finches as an example to tell that all these 5 finches are living on the same tree, but they have changed their foraging patterns in order to avoid competition. And all 5 are living on the same tree by doing resource partitioning. So we completed the third population interaction, that is competition. Now in our next lecture, we'll discuss about commensalism and emmensialism. If you like the lectures, like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.